Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, here today with another regular Audio Amigo review for you guys. Today we're looking at a classy looking IEM from Sivga. This is the Sivga Que, or Q, or Ki. I'm going to say it Que because I think it's funny as a native Spanish speaker to have something called the Que. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be calling it. It was released back in June of 2024 and is priced at $70 US. With its classy maple wooden faceplate and its sleek design, does it have what it takes to stand out in what is rapidly becoming one of the most competitive price brackets? Let's find out. Quick disclaimer, this unit of the Ke was sent to me by Sivga themselves for review. I am not being paid for this review, but because I could turn around and sell this if I wanted, I have gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you very much to Sivga for sending me the set, and thank you all for your support. We'll start things off with the unboxing experience. The Ke has a good unboxing experience. The IEMs are front and center with those wooden shells on display. Also inside the package, you will find this quite nice looking leather case. Inside is the cable, a plastic tie for the cable, and two sets of ear tips. You get these black core standard bore ones in 4 sizes, small, medium, large, and extra large. And you get these wider bore white core ear tips in small, medium, and large. The leather case I actually really like. Sivga's known for doing good cases on their over-ear headphones as well. The leather feels much nicer than on some other IEM cases at this price point. The inside is soft and padded. The mesh pouch is very usable. It's a little bit too big to be pocketable, but it's also big enough that you could fit like a dongle DAC and some ear tips in here, so I think it makes for a nice travel case. For $70, I feel like this is an adequate accessories package. Another set of ear tips would have been nice, but I think this carry case is nice enough that I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a really good accessories package, especially at this price. So, let's go ahead and look at the cable. It's a little bit chonky, but it's not too cumbersome to use, at least during my testing it wasn't. This is a sort of chunky 2-wire twist that splits into individual conductors at the Y-split. It reminds me of like a smaller, slightly plasticier version of the Manta cable on the Mega 5 EST base, and that's a very good first impression to give. The 3.5mm connector has this cool Sivga branding on it. It is contoured for, easier grip when you're pulling it out of a stubborn DAC or amp. The chin slider here is the slot style one. You can see there, it's a slot, so it sits flush against the contoured Y-split, and it slides actually quite nicely on the cables without, becoming loose really easily. It's an actually quite functional Y-split. The 2-pin connectors match the metal tone and like the machined notes on the rest of the hardware and have very clearly visible R and L stereo markers on them. The ear hooks are okay. They feel nice in the ears. They're not, overly uncomfortable. A little bit plasticky, but overall I'd say they feel right nice. Generally, I really like this cable. I think it's well suited to the IEM. I think it matches the sort of color of the metal very well. If you look at the shells and the hardware side by side, it's a very good match in terms of color. Yeah, I think that it's a great cable for an IEM at this price. So let's talk about the construction on these. These are full die-cast zinc metal shells with sort of screwed-in nozzles on the bottom and these white maple faceplates that I mentioned earlier. As I said, the nozzles are screwed into the lower shell and feature these nice geometric-shaped filters on them. The diameter of those filters is roughly 5.2 millimeters for those of you interested in modding. In terms of ventilation, you've got 2 vents on the sort of inside of the IEM. You've got one on the sort of funnel above the driver there for the front volume. You've got another one back here by the stereo indicator for the back volume. Thanks to both of those, I didn't experience any driver flex or pressure buildup on these. The seam that separates the top and bottom half of the shell is clearly visible and a bit prominent, but it doesn't feel unnaturally sharp or protrude into your ears while you're wearing these IEMs. Overall, I would say, I like all metal shells. They feel nice and sturdy in the hands. They come off as solid. I would expect these to be quite durable. So let me go ahead and pull up the specifications. The Ke is powered by a single 10mm dynamic driver with a beryllium-coated diaphragm. Single DDs are usually pretty easy to drive, and I think the Ke is no exception. The standard sort of 32 ohm impedance and the sensitivity above 100 make this super easy to drive, even with older gear like my Minidisc player or the Walkmans or my older Sony Xperia phone. The shells weigh in at 10 grams each, so they're slightly on the heavier side, but that's sort of in line with other full metal build IEMs. The nozzles are around 6¼ millimeter in diameter, putting them a little on the larger side, but nowhere near what I would consider huge nozzles. This being a single DD with no passive components attached, its frequency response does not change when exposed to higher output impedance sources or impedance adapters, and the stock cable carries a resistance of 0.3 ohms with my multimeter. Overall, pretty typical specifications for a single DD set at this price range. But now it's time to move on to the cool wall. This is going to be a case of metal shells being elegant and understated rather than cool. But the saving grace for the Ke is that I am a real sucker for wood on basically anything. I love the whole 70s wood grain aesthetic. I think the white maple on these shells works really well. Each shell is going to be kind of different due to the fact that it is physical wood. Every tree is sort of different. I think I got some nice looking ones here. I'm going to be putting these in cool. I'll say it comes entirely down to the wood on the shells making it cool. If it was something else, I don't know if it would have been there. Also, I think you're going to depend on what kind of wood grain you get on yours as to how pretty they're going to be. But, I'm a sucker for wooden headphones, so yeah, it's going to be in cool. So, while I might be a fan of wood grain on headphones, electronics, cars, and basically everything, let's see what the Council of Ladies has to say about the Ke. Looks like they don't have a soft spot for wood on headphones, at least not on these. 3 not pretties, a meh, and a pretty, so overall not a very good showing here for Sivga. I'm also not expecting a whole lot in terms of compliments, 3 to 2 against, so I guess overall things ended up slightly better than before, but as far as their thoughts go, it looks like there is some love for the wood here, but boring seems to be the overall feeling here. When it comes to comfort, I had a few issues with the Ke. I think this sort of funnel, like soft funnel shape they have going on here is very nice feeling once it's in the ear. But I did have issues with these. Several ear tips, I tried to get a slightly deeper mount than normal, and they kept sliding out. I don't know if it's because of that funnel or just the shape doesn't work well in my ears or what. I even had these leave a tip in my ears, even despite the sort of lip there. But I was struggling to find a tip that would work with these. Even my standard CP145 testing tips, I had to push them all the way down to here to get them to not get left behind in my ears, and even then I couldn't get what I would call a real comfy, real good seal. I did end up swapping to the stock tips because while I was able to wear them comfortably for several hours, I had to constantly adjust them in my ears to keep the seal consistent. I found that the stock tips did seal better, and they did manage to stay in my ears better, but those tips just weren't as comfortable for me. I think I might be in between their sizes. I'm usually a medium in the right ear and a large in the left, and the 2 sizes that were the closest to me were still not really all that comfortable. So I could only really do 1 to 2 hours of slightly uncomfortable listening with these stock tips. The same goes for my wife. She thought similarly, and these ended up failing the tiny ears test. The nozzles are just a bit too wide for her. She could only get a shallow fit with these, and due to the weight of the metal shells, they did end up wanting to fall out of her ears more easily. She did try for a deeper fit, but found that with the deeper fit, wearing time would be extremely limited. So overall, these were, I would say, passable for me and a straight-up fail for my wife. Let's move into the sound signature for the Ke. The bass on these is fairly neutral, but there is a little bit of a mid-bass boost that makes it sound nice and thumpy in the right areas. Nothing too crazy, but it's really satisfying to listen to. Pendulum's Fasten Your Seatbelts doesn't sound lacking to me in terms of bass. The Ke doesn't make it come off as super boosted or ultra bassy, but it's a nice replay. Kick drums and bass guitar are some of the more of the same story. Fleetwood Mac's Tusk with the USC Marching Band has the bass guitar maintaining a nice presence throughout the back of the track, and the low drums that go with it don't really get drowned out even when the track gets busier or louder. Overall, I feel the bass on the Ke is fine. The mid bass is enough to give the set some dynamic to it, a dynamic nature, and I'm a fan of the bass presentation on this overall. The sort of subtlety of the mid-bass boost leads to a mostly unbothered mid-range tonality. Male vocals are essentially unaffected in terms of tonality, and instruments are clean and easy to separate. Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity, I feel, replays very well on this set. It's clear, I didn't get any masking when sort of piano and bass are covering the same frequency range, and JK's vocals didn't have any added nasal quality to them. I felt the track was very well played here. Female vocals have a decent emphasis, sort of a boost going on here. Fana's Aozora Rhapsody has Tawana's vocals, front and center, but I don't think that they're tonally bothered. There's no added nasal quality to them. There's no husk from the bass boost. I think the vocals are very nice and forward, sort of spotlighted in a nice way without completely dominating the rest of the replay. Overall, I would say this is a female vocal forward set. It puts a bit of a spotlight on them, as I said. But with the exception of that, the mid-range on the Ke is neutral, clean, very well done. Moving on to the upper mids and treble. This set has a bit of extra energy up here. Nano's vocals in Savior of Song have a lot of energy to them. She has these lower notes that throw off some nice harmonics, and her higher notes have a lot of microphone interaction detail with them. Some of her S's can get a tiny bit sibilant on this at higher volume. So if you're particularly treble sensitive, just be careful with the volume, or maybe consider another set if you are a high volume listener. Outside of that, the vocal harmonics on the sustained notes that she sang decayed very naturally, and I didn't feel any sort of overcooked, overemphasized nature to those harmonics. It's a similar story with the percussion. House of Pain's Jump Around sounds pretty airy and fantastic here. That sort of iconic squeal in the back of the song that might be Prince's voice, depending on who you ask, but might not be. It has a fundamental frequency of around 1.5 kilohertz on my spectrogram, but it throws harmonics all the way up to 10 kilohertz. And the hi-hats are throwing harmonics all the way up to 15 kilohertz. Like the vocal harmonics, some of those can be a little bit hot for some users, especially at higher volumes. I found them sort of just fine. Like the S sounds I mentioned earlier, they can be a bit hot at higher volumes, but at my testing volumes or at sort of more moderate volumes, really not an issue here. In terms of technicalities, I feel like beryllium diaphragm dynamic drivers tend to have good low-end performance, and although this set might be more focused on the higher end of the frequency range versus the low, I still think the low-end detail retrieval is quite good. The bass guitar that lives in the left ear of Stan Getz's Samba Triste, for example, has really great definition to it. You can hear the subtle buzzing of the strings as they're being plucked, even after the loud saxophone comes in that same ear and starts to try to drown it out a little bit. Still very audible here, good detail retrieval on the low end. On the upper end of things, the extra energy helps focus things on the sort of minor details. Leonard Skinnard's Simple Man has a lot of wonderful subtlety to the way the cymbals and the hi-hats are played. Lots of good stick definition on the sort of edge hits and on some of the other notes. The Ke does a good job rendering them. You can distinguish edge hits from sort of hits closer to the bell very easily. I feel like in terms of single dynamic driver technical performance, I would put this just a hair behind the EA500 LM in terms of overall capability, but I still think this is a very good little driver in this set. When it comes to stereo separation, the Ke doesn't disappoint. Mediterranean Sundance doesn't sound claustrophobic or closed in any way. The audience doesn't interfere with the two guitarists. It's overall a quite nice replay when it comes to stereo separation. As far as perceived 3D soundstage goes, this set will not hold back well-mastered tracks. Steely Dan's Two Against Nature sounds nice and wide on this set. The band's mastering is sort of conveying the typical high level of positional information that they typically like to do. Cymbals are spread out behind you. The horns are, again, also all sorts of around you. The piano is in the right ear, the bass in the left. It's a good replay here. I would say that overall the Ke does really well here. I would say it's in line with the other sets sort of at this price point. So the Sivga Que comes off to me as a sort of neutral-ish tuning. It's got a little bit of a bright tilt going on, at least that's how it came off to me in my testing. It's not too fatiguing for me, and I feel like it puts a good spotlight on female vocals. If you watched my Kima 2 review, you have a general idea of the sets we're going to see in the comparison segment here, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. First off, we're going to bring back the same budget sound-alike as last time. The $15 KZ Krilla is a slightly brighter version of the Ke. It's lacking, I would say, in overall detail retrieval, and the bass lacks a little bit of punch compared to the Ke in its stock configuration. But I would say if you're looking for that neutral-ish, slightly bright tuning. The Krilla is a sort of solid budget option of, $15 or less. Moving up in price and at parity with the Ke at $70 is the Simgot EW300 priced at $70. This time I'm going to be looking at the silver nozzle tuning. As with some other IEMs I've had in the last couple of videos, my EW300 is out on loan, so we're going to have to pretend that its little brother, the 200, is the EW300 here. Again, I did all my listening tests before it left, and I'm basing what I'm saying off of my listening notes. In a few future videos, I will have IEMs that I might want to compare with that I don't have listening notes for. I will make it very clear for you which ones I have listening notes for and which ones I don't, so don't worry about that. Anyway, EW300 is basically just a more V-shaped version of the Ke. It has more bass, more treble. It results in a more dynamic, exciting sound, at least with the silver nozzles. The Ke comes off as more relaxed than the EW300 with the silver nozzles, but not quite as relaxed as the EW300 with the gold nozzles, so keep that in mind if you're treble sensitive. If you found the EW300 with the silver nozzles fatiguing, you might not necessarily find the Ke fatiguing, but the gold nozzles on the EW200 are easily the most chill and relaxing choice of like the three tunings here. The biggest difference with either nozzle on this set is going to be the bass. The EW300 is much more bass forward than the Ke. So if you prefer a leaner bass presentation, the Ke is going to be the one for you. Next up, priced at $80, and what is probably going to be the next video on this channel, we have the Dunu Titan S2, priced, like I said, at $80 US. These two are super close-ish in terms of overall tuning. The Ke is definitely the more vocal forward of the two. The Titan S2 is brighter, airier, and in my opinion sounds a bit clearer overall. The Ke, however, has a little bit of extra body to the mid-range that I personally appreciate. I don't know if it's a subtlety in the tuning or if it's the difference between, beryllium and composite diaphragms on the drivers, but the Titan S2 just comes across a little bit leaner in the lower mids to me. It's that little bit lighter, sound signature, it feels like. The Ke comes off to me as a little bit richer, and a little bit more musical, for lack of a better term. I would say if you have a library full of female vocals, go ahead and grab the Ke. If you want a brighter, airier version of this sort of tuning, maybe look into the Titan S2. Lastly, we have the Dunu Kima 2, priced at $120 US. The Kima 2 is the most expensive IEM of this group, but sort of all this group that have been relatively close in tuning, I feel like the Kima 2 is the closest overall to the Ke. The Kima 2 is essentially, at least to my ears, a more refined, more controlled version of the Ke. As I mentioned, I feel that the Ke can be just that little bit sharp in some tracks, especially at higher volumes, whereas the Kima 2 for me didn't really have that. I understand that these two occupy very different price brackets. There's a $50 difference here, and that's a lot of money these days. What I will say is if you had the Kima 2, or you've heard the Kima 2, and you wanted a sort of more vocal forward version of this, and you didn't have the budget for this, I think the Ke is better at being like a mini Kima 2 than even the Titan S2 can. I think the Ke is closer to the Kima's tuning than the Titan S2 is to the Kima's tuning. So I think this, if you were looking at the Kima, but it's just a little bit out of your price range, is a good like plan B. So let's go ahead and sum up the comparisons. Again, Krilla makes an appearance as the budget sound alike. It's lacking a little warmth compared to everything else here, but I feel it's overall very nice for the price. The EW300, I think, can give you a Ke-ish tuning with the silver nozzles, but it's got a good bit more bass, and depending on what nozzles you use, will come off as either much more V-shaped or much warmer than the Ke. The Titan S2 is probably the second closest thing on this table to the Ke. It's a bit less warm, a little bit brighter, and it's got more airiness than the Ke. It's the more revealing, sort of slightly technical listen, whereas the Ke is a bit more relaxing. If you're a fan of the treble sparkle, then the S2 is going to be the choice for you. Lastly, the Kima 2, which, as I said, the Ke is sort of a Kima 2 mini, but with a bit more of a vocal forward presentation. It's not as refined as the Kima 2. The Kima 2, I feel, is that little bit more resolving, that little bit smoother. I just think it's the better set. But again, $50 more than this. I think this is a good alternative at that price. So, went ahead and got everyone else out of the way, and let's figure out where the Sivga Que is going to go on the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale. I feel like this little set has a lot going for it. It's well built, it comes with a really nice case, it sounds nice, and it has the looks to it as well. I think it looks pretty good. I think for 70 bucks, it's a solid competitive set. No, it's not as nice as the Kima 2, but like I said, that you can get this and a Truthier Zero for the price of the Kima 2, so not really competing there. The EW300, I think, is the more versatile set if you've got 70 bucks to spend, but this, has a lot more bass. I think this is still a very nice set if you prefer that more subdued bass presentation. Female vocals here are really nice. I think if you have a lot of female vocalists in your library and you're not really a fan of the big boomy bass, I feel like a lot of sets that have a sort of female vocal spotlight can have boosted bass these days, and it's nice to see something that is still bassy, but not in a completely, excessive way. This is a very subdued bass boost is what I'll say. The only fly in the ointment for me is the fit. Again, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the shape or just the way my ears were, but I tip rolled for a good while with these. Trying all the tips I had, I would get a good fit, and then it would just slide out. I get a good fit, and then I start to get ear fatigue. I just couldn't find a set that vibed with my ears until I switched to the stock tips, which, while they may not have been as comfortable as I would have liked, did make them stay in my ears much better than a bunch of other options. They just, like I said, weren't as comfortable. All things considered, and considering how ridiculously competitive this price range is, I'm going to put the Ke into but I like this. I think it's a very compelling option in the under $100 space. I wish it would, fit me a little bit better. I know a lot of people really like the fit of this one. It just didn't work for me. The value, I think, while not amazing, is pretty solid. You get a good driver in a good shell at a good price. I think it's not. I think it's overall pretty good. I think it won't be a lot of people's first choice due to the more subdued bass presentation, but like I said, if you've got a lot of female vocalists in your library and you prefer a subdued bass presentation, I think this is the winner for you. So, time for the recommendation. The Ke is a good little set. As I said, I think it's well priced. I think it sounds nice. I like the case it comes with. And in terms of how capable the driver is, I think it's very competitive in its sort of price class. It isn't for bass heads. The mid bass has good punch, but it won't be satisfying for people who really want that, thumpy low-end rumble and the really punchy mid bass. The sub bass is just too neutral for that. Treble heads also will want a bit more sparkle here. This might be a bit too subdued for people who really, really want their cymbals to be, sizzly and sharp. It also might not be for people who are looking for something that's completely neutral. I think the mid bass is just maybe a little bit too thumpy, and it might be just a little bit too bright for people who are looking for something that's like truly, truly neutral. But I would say it's not bad at being neutralish. It's like the Kima 2, just a little bit less warm. I would say if you like the cut of the Kima 2's jib, but 120 bucks is just outside your budget, this is a fantastic little alternative. I also think if you're looking for a detailed vocal forward set that doesn't have a ton of bass going on, this is probably one of the best choices under 100 bucks. Also, if you're looking for an all-metal build IEM in terms of durability that has some style going on to it, I think this is one of the better-looking all-metal IEMs in the like $50 to $100 price range. It's very, very solid. I think Sivga did an excellent job with this one. But that's gonna wrap this one up. I like the Ke. I looked it up. I think the name means magpie, but like I said, the native Spanish speaker in me just sees Ke, and it's funny to me. So I apologize for everyone for pronouncing the name wrong this whole review, but I can't control myself. It was just so funny. But that's going to do it for me for now. I really hope you all enjoyed this review. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.